Hello, everybody. Welcome to a little session here. We're a little lecture on the end of World War One. You guys should have just finished your exit ticket from last week. So this will be pretty short and sweet. You could obviously use your guided notes to fill out this as you guys are listening to this. Uh, go find the slide and go along with it. Oh, hold on. All right, sorry about that. Had to let my dog back inside. So anyways, as I was saying, find your class notes, your guide notes that I gave you. So obviously we're gonna be talking about the end of World War One. We left off last week talking about how America was neutral and the steps that led the U.S. entering the war. Again, the war started in 1914. The U.S. won't enter until 1917, though. Remember, like the sinking of the Lusitania, the USS Sussex, the Zimmerman Notes, unrestricted submarine warfare. All these things led to America finally, over those 3-year period, finally joining the war of the joining the side of the Allies. So basically, we're going to start off where America kind of enters the war. So again, as I said in this first slide here, you see trench warfare causes stalemate. So basically, guys, the war started in 1914, the Battle of the Marne. You are going to see for the next 3 years, the Germans are going to dig in, the British and French are going to dig in. That's basically where it's going to be stalemated at along the Western Front. Germany tries to do offensives, the French and British try to do offensives, and it's just going to be a stalemate, a big like clog. Because again, I'll think about all the technology and weaponry that we talked about in class, so it's going to be unsuccessful. At this point, 3 years of fighting, and think about all the things we talked about. What it was like to live in a trench. It was cold in the winter, rat problems, lice problems. Again, this was on both sides of the war. So after 3 years of fighting, guys, both sides of the war was extremely tired. The soldiers just about had it. Again, you're human, and you can only deal with the elements for so long. Now, I think I kind of mentioned this to you guys before, but essentially, you have Italy is going to change sides, and they're really never technically gonna fight for the Central Powers. They signed a treaty back in like the 1800s with Germany and with Austria-Hungary. But when World War One broke out, technically they were on their side, but ultimately, eventually later on, they're going to join the side of the Allies. And this will, again, they can kind of see the writing on the wall. They join the side, but really the Allied powers, they never really fully trust Italy. They don't really have necessarily a huge horse in the race, as I guess you can say, in terms of the amount of money and the amount of soldiers and the amount of loss of life that some of the other Allied powers really had or experienced. They don't really make a huge impact on the war either. So really, the leaders of these countries they're not really going to fully trust Italy all that much, even though they end up joining their side later on. Um, Now, think back to world history last year. We talked about this in Russia. Russia had some very difficult times. So again, keep in mind, Russia was on the Allied side. So France, you had Great Britain, and then you had the United States join later, and Russia. Those were really the big four. But Russia is dealing with really their own revolution back at home, and Russia will end up dropping out of World War One in 1917 because of the Bolshevik Revolution. Remember, Bolsheviks were communists. Starting in the 1900s, you started getting this big communist movement called the Bolsheviks, and Russia was going through extreme poverty, problems in the government, and by 1917, just the devastation from the war, lack of food, lack of supplies, lack of jobs for the people, that started to kind of build that revolution up. As I said, in the early 1900s, there was not really a whole lot of support for it, but when the war broke out, you start seeing more and more and more people. Scarlett, get out of there. More and more people began to join the Bolsheviks. That became very, very popular. Remember, Vladimir Lenin had this big uprising that gained a lot of popularity. So Russia's going to drop out of the war. Okay. So essentially, America is going to replace Russia. And think about what we're going to bring into the war. Like, what can America bring? We're going to bring fresh troops. We're going to bring technology, and most importantly, we're going to bring war production. You got to understand that, guys, the war wasn't fought in the United States, so our factories were untouched. Our manufacturing was full go, full tilt, soaring. compared to the war was taking place in Europe. So a lot of these countries, their factories and industrial centers were pulverized. So that's gonna be a big, big, big component in terms of what we're gonna bring to the table. Fresh troops, lots of troops, millions of soldiers, and more importantly, production. Tanks, airplanes. Our country is gonna be able to outproduce really all the countries combined. Again, because of the fact that one, we were very vicious on the home front in terms of our men and women who worked longer hours and did their parts in the home front, but also because the war wasn't fought here. Kind of very similar to kind of what we're going on now. I think it's kind of pretty interesting. I think we mentioned this in class the other day. There's a big influenza epidemic. They call it the Spanish flu. Between 20 to 40 million people died worldwide. Obviously, we're dealing with that now here with Corona. A very similar thing, a worldwide global pandemic that brought a lot of death and destruction along its way. This is also during the time of World War One too, so it was really really difficult time. And then finally, once America enters the war, guys, that's as I mentioned earlier earlier in the previous thing, um, 3 years of fighting, people are devastated, they're tired, and America comes in, boom, fresh troops. Eventually, it'll be the end of the war for Germany. Germany's going to surrender, an armistice ceasefire signed on November 11th, 1918. I had you guys do a Veterans Day. Veterans Day is November 11th. Why? Because it was the end of World War One, end of the Great War. That's when it was ended. So, little factoid for you. Now, finally, what you've been working on here in a little bit, we'll deal with this. Towards the end of the war, the big three, you call it big four, but really it's the big three. Woodrow Wilson, United States president, David Lloyd George, he is the British president, and George Clemenceau is the French president. Really, it's a big three. I put Vittorio Orlando there because I guess Italy, was a big country at the time. He was invited, got a big player, so to speak, but ultimately he didn't really have a whole lot of power or say so at this conference. But ultimately, the big three will meet in Paris and they'll discuss the terms of the treaty. What do they want out of the treaty? What do they want out of Germany? What are the terms going to be? So they met in Paris, and each leader, and as you guys will learn about, each leader had very, very, very different views for how they wanted to handle the treaty. That brought some arguing, that brought some, just different viewpoints for how they wanted to go about doing things. But ultimately, I like to think of this as like a learning lesson. As you guys have probably learned last year in global, how I really want you guys to analyze what each of these leaders really wanted, and ultimately, um, what do you think was which vision do you think was better? Do you think it was Wilson's? Do you think it was David Lloyd George? Do you think it was George Clemenceau? And why? All right, so guys, what you're gonna be working on now, once you're done with this lecture, there's an assignment I'm gonna pass out to you guys. You're gonna be looking through Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. You guys may learn about this a little bit in global last year, but I want you guys to kind of look at kind of what he wanted. I believe in the document it talks about kind of what he wanted as well. But here's the document right here. Let me see. Let me pull this up for you guys. So here's the document. You're going to read through this. President Woodrow Wilson's 14 points were intended to assure Americans that World War I was being fought for a moral cause and for lasting peace in Europe. Each point was a plan. So when there's 14 points that Wilson had, President Woodrow Wilson, and U.S. president. So this was his 14th plan for peace after World War One. So despite Wilson's good intentions, I'm just reading right here. Despite his good intentions for 14 points, many people in the United States were against some of his ideas. Wilson traveled the country for months, giving speeches to gain support for it. He worked himself so hard, in fact, that he suffered a stroke while left him paralyzed on the left side and blind in the left eye. To help Wilson get his point across about how these points will achieve peace, you have been assigned to create advertising flags for 6 of his most important main points to the American people. You want Americans to support the 14 points and see how they will bring about peace in the future. Sorry, it went up. Below are summaries of 6 of Wilson's 14 points. First, think about how the idea will help bring about peace. Then on your paper, write a title for that point on the line and create an image to represent. So again, 14 points. I only have 6 of them for you, 6 most important ideas from it. So what you're going to do is here's flags. You guys are going to create a title for each flag and draw a picture. So title it somewhere right up here. 1, title it right here. 2, you're going to title it up here, not on the flag, but on this line. And you're going to draw a picture inside the flag that represents, so from 1 here, you're going to read this, create a title, put it here, and draw a picture in here. Same for 2. 2, I'm going to read this one, Absolute Freedom of the Seas, a Like in the Peace and War. And same thing, I'm going to title it right here and then draw a picture in there. So when you are done, let me know. Good luck and go Middies.